He thought nothing could break their family. But when his mother was murdered, and the clues led straight back to the people he trusted most, the badge on his chest felt heavier than ever. This isn't just a mystery, it's a betrayal that cuts through bloodlines. And the truth? It's darker than anyone could have imagined. In the embrace of emerald valleys, where the sun painted the horizon with strokes of gold each dawn, nestled a quaint farm. This sanctuary was home to Elena and Ricardo, their hearts intertwined like the ancient vines that climbed the stone walls of their dwelling. Their laughter echoed through the orchards, a symphony harmonizing with the chirping of unseen birds. 3 vibrant souls, their children, had blossomed under their loving gaze, each a testament to the unbreakable bond they shared. Life unfolded with a gentle rhythm, seasons turning into years, marked only by the warmth of family gatherings and the quiet satisfaction of honest toil. No storm dared to breach their haven, no shadow darkened their doorstep. For what seemed like an eternity, their existence was a tapestry woven with threads of contentment and serenity. But fate, as it often does, held a cruel twist in its hand. The tranquil melody of their lives was about to shatter, replaced by a discordant note of unimaginable horror. One starless night, under the cloak of an unsuspecting slumber, tragedy struck. Elena, the heart of their home, the gentle hand that nurtured their dreams, was stolen from them. The news ripped through the close-knit community like a wildfire, leaving behind a trail of disbelief and anguish. Ricardo, her steadfast partner, was plunged into a chasm of inconsolable grief. Their children, once filled with youthful exuberance, now stood on the precipice of a nightmare. Among them was Mateo, their middle child, a man forged in the crucible of discipline and duty. He wore the uniform of the local constabulary, his days usually spent upholding the peace of their valley. But now, a different kind of duty called to him, a deeply personal one. With a resolve that belied his inner turmoil, Mateo stepped forward. He would be the one to unravel this heinous act, to trace the phantom hand that had extinguished his mother's light. Yet, as he delved deeper into the shadows that now clung to their once bright home, he knew he had to tread a treacherous path. The officer in him had to eclipse the sun, the investigator his grief. The truth, he sensed, lay buried beneath layers of sorrow and secrets, waiting to be unearthed. The familiar comfort of their valley had become a landscape of suspicion, and the bonds of family would soon be tested by the weight of a devastating revelation. The investigation had begun, casting a long shadow over the valley's once unblemished serenity. From the stillness shattered by a scream, a quest for truth began, promising to unveil the darkness that had descended upon their tranquil farm. Okay, I understand. You want me to significantly expand the section titled Mang Loi Gi Kai Bu Ave, which I will translate to the Web of Suspicion Titans for the English version, increasing the word count by approximately 781 words to reach a total of at least 1707 words. The expansion should focus on detailing the initial investigation, introducing Detective Marco, describing the crime scene, highlighting inconsistencies, presenting family members and their relationships, noting conflicting testimonies and suspicious details, and hinting at hidden family secrets. I need to add more details, examples, and deeper explanations to the existing points while maintaining a smooth and natural flow in English. I will also incorporate elements of drama, conflict, strong emotions, vivid descriptions, and character development as suggested in the Creative Expansion Guidelines. I will ensure not to add repetitive content, stray from the main points, introduce new conclusions if one already exists, and keep the entire response in English. The morning sun, a reluctant participant in the unfolding tragedy, cast long, distorted shadows across the dew-kissed fields as Marco, a detective barely past his academy days but with an intensity in his gaze that belied his youth, stepped onto the gravel path leading to the farmhouse. The air, usually alive with the chirping of birds and the gentle rustling of leaves, now held a heavy silence, broken only by the distant, mournful caw of a crow. This stillness, Marco knew, was the aftermath of something violent, a stark contrast to the peace one would expect in this secluded corner of the valley. He carried the weight of the local community's shocking grief on his young shoulders, the expectation that he would pierce through the darkness that had enveloped the seemingly tranquil life of the homestead. The farmhouse itself presented a jarring dichotomy. From a distance, it still held the familiar silhouette of a family home, smoke curling gently from the chimney, hinting at a life that continued, oblivious to the horror within. But closer inspection revealed the brutal intrusion. The sturdy oak front door, a silent sentinel that had witnessed countless greetings and farewells, now lay precariously on its hinges, the splintered wood a raw testament to a forced entry. It was an open invitation to the scene of devastation within, a visual scream that echoed the one that had shattered the night. Stepping inside, Marco's senses were immediately assaulted by the chaotic aftermath. The living room, likely once a space of comfort and shared moments, was now a landscape of disarray. Overturned armchairs lay like fallen giants, their plush cushions scattered across the floor like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. A delicate porcelain vase, its painted flowers once a cheerful adornment on the mantelpiece, now existed only as a collection of jagged shards on the aged wooden floorboards, a poignant symbol of shattered beauty. Initially, the scene screamed robbery gone wrong, a desperate act fueled by greed that had escalated to violence. However, as Marco's trained eyes, sharp and observant despite the turmoil of the scene, began their meticulous sweep of the room, subtle discordances emerged, whispering doubts that contradicted the initial, straightforward narrative. His gaze lingered on the antique silver cutlery set, gleaming faintly within the glass doors of the dining cabinet, untouched and undisturbed. This was no ordinary silverware, it was a cherished family heirloom, spoken of with pride by neighbors, yet it remained. In the adjacent study, a velvet-lined box lay open on a heavy oak desk, revealing a collection of valuable coins, Ricardo's prized possession, each carefully catalogued and displayed. These, too, were untouched. These details painted a picture far removed from the frantic grab-and-go of typical thieves. There was a deliberate selectivity, a focus that hinted at a motive beyond mere material gain. Moving into the master bedroom, the air grew heavier, tinged with a faint, metallic scent that made Marco's stomach clench. Elena lay still amidst the rumpled bedclothes, her serene features now frozen in a final, silent expression of surprise or perhaps terror. A single, brutal blow to the back of her head was starkly evident, suggesting a swift, merciless attack, not the chaotic struggle one would anticipate if she had fought off intruders. Then, a subtle, almost imperceptible aroma reached Marco's nostrils, the faint, sweet scent of almonds, a detail that immediately triggered a silent alarm within his mind, a red flag waving in the face of the obvious. He meticulously noted the positioning of her body, the way her limbs lay, a detail that seemed oddly composed, almost arranged, rather than the haphazard sprawl of someone struck down in haste. Ricardo, Elena's husband, greeted Marco with a face etched with grief, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a seemingly bottomless sorrow. He recounted the events of the previous evening in a voice thick with emotion, each word punctuated by a trembling breath. "Theirs had been a quiet night," he explained, a simple supper shared under the warm glow of the kitchen lamp, followed by an hour spent reading in the comfortable silence of the living room before they retired to their bedroom. He claimed to have heard nothing untoward during the night, only awakening to the horrifying discovery in the cold light of dawn. His hands shook visibly as he spoke, and tears welled in his eyes, yet Marco couldn't shake the unsettling feeling of a carefully constructed narrative, a subtle guardedness in his gaze that seemed to contradict the raw emotion he portrayed. Their eldest child, Isabella, a woman whose pragmatic nature was evident in her steady gaze and composed demeanor, arrived shortly after, her outward calm a stark contrast to her father's visible distress. She spoke of her parents' deep and enduring love, their unwavering devotion to each other that had been the bedrock of their family. Yet, beneath this controlled facade, Marco detected a fleeting flicker of something else, a tightly held tension around her jaw, a profound sadness in her eyes that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken burdens. She mentioned a recent disagreement between her parents, a minor squabble, she insisted, quickly dismissing it as utterly inconsequential. But Marco, ever observant, filed this detail away, another piece in the increasingly complex puzzle. Then there was Julian, the youngest of the siblings, his youthful face crumpled with unadulterated sorrow, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. His grief was palpable, raw and unrestrained, filling the room with a heavy atmosphere of loss. He spoke of his mother's boundless kindness, her unwavering support and encouragement that had shaped his young life. He couldn't comprehend the malice that would drive someone to harm her, His pain seemed utterly genuine, yet his recollections of the night were fragmented, clouded by the deep sleep of youth and a natural obliviousness to the subtle undercurrents of adult life within the household. As Marco began to delve deeper, venturing beyond the immediate scene and interviewing neighbors and acquaintances in the close-knit valley community, a more intricate and nuanced picture of the family began to emerge, one painted with subtle shades of complexity that lay hidden beneath the seemingly simple veneer of rural tranquility. Whispers of past financial difficulties that had once cast a shadow over the farm, a long-forgotten but still simmering land dispute with a neighboring farmer whose property bordered theirs, and the hushed tones surrounding a distant relative who had fallen out of favor with the family years ago. These fragmented pieces of information painted a landscape where not all was as idyllic and peaceful as it initially appeared. A local handyman named Elias, a man with withered hands and knowing eyes that had seen much in his years, offered a particularly unsettling detail. He mentioned an unusual visitor to the farm a few weeks prior, a shadowy figure he couldn't quite place, someone who seemed out of sync with the familiar faces of the valley. He couldn't provide a name, only a vague description: tall, always cloaked in the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat, and gone as quickly and silently as he had appeared. The detail was unsettling, a phantom presence in their otherwise familiar world, raising questions about who might have had reason to visit the secluded farm. Marco also learned of a strained and often acrimonious relationship between Elena and her sister-in-law, Clara, Ricardo's sharp-tongued and often critical sibling who resided in the nearby town. Clara, known for her envious nature and a penchant for occasional bitter remarks, had reportedly engaged in several heated exchanges with Elena over the years, fueled by perceived slights, long-simmering resentments, and differing opinions on family matters. While these interpersonal frictions might seem petty on the surface, Marco meticulously noted them, recognizing them as potential breeding grounds for deeper animosities and possible motives. As the initial hours bled into days, and the pale light of dawn gave way to the harsh glare of midday before softening into the hues of twilight, the initial theory of a simple robbery began to fray and unravel, replaced by a gnawing and persistent suspicion that something far more intricate, more deeply personal, lay at the dark heart of this tragedy. The carefully staged elements of the crime scene, the inexplicably untouched valuables, the lingering, unsettling scent, the conflicting and subtly guarded emotions of the bereaved family members. Each detail acted as a thread in a growing web of doubt, slowly ensnaring those closest to Elena in a network of suspicion. The seemingly impenetrable facade of a happy, close-knit family had begun to crack, revealing the hidden fault lines and long-held tensions that ran deep beneath the surface of their rural existence. What long-buried secrets lay concealed within the heart of this family, and who among them held the key to unlocking the devastating truth? The investigation was far from concluding. In fact, for Detective Marco, it felt as though it was only just beginning to peel back the intricate and deeply unsettling layers of a complex and potentially sinister mystery. The inconsistencies at the crime scene and the subtle, yet palpable, undercurrents within the family hinted at a truth far more convoluted and emotionally charged than a random act of violence. What hidden motives lurked beneath the surface of their seemingly peaceful lives, and who stood to gain from Elena's demise? The web of suspicion was tightening, and Marco knew that untangling it would require not only sharp intellect but also a profound understanding of the human heart and its capacity for both great love and unspeakable darkness. The tightening web of suspicion, spun from inconsistencies at the crime scene and the subtly discordant notes within the family's initial reactions, began to draw Detective Marco deeper into the lives of those left behind. What lay beneath the surface of their grief? What secrets, long buried and perhaps festering, could have bloomed into such a violent act? The investigation now turned its gaze inward, towards the intricate tapestry of relationships and the hidden corridors of the past that might illuminate the present darkness. Marco's initial interviews, while providing a surface narrative, had also unearthed subtle contradictions and evasions. Ricardo, for all his outward display of sorrow, seemed to carefully steer the conversation, his grief almost too performative, too perfectly timed. Was it genuine devastation, the raw outpouring of a husband who had lost his wife, or a carefully constructed shield designed to deflect suspicion? Marco noted the precise moments Ricardo's voice would crack, the almost theatrical way he would clutch his chest, details that felt rehearsed rather than spontaneous. Isabella, the pragmatic daughter, had been quick to dismiss the recent parental disagreement as trivial, labeling it a mere misunderstanding, yet the lingering sadness in her eyes suggested a deeper unease, a knowledge perhaps of fractures within the family unit that ran deeper than a simple spat. Did she downplay the argument to protect someone, or to protect the family's image? And young Julian, his grief raw and seemingly unadulterated, offered little in the way of concrete details, his youth a convenient veil over the complexities of his parents' lives. Was his innocence genuine, or was he selectively oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that might have permeated the Ashton household? Marco sensed a fragility in his demeanor, a reluctance to meet his gaze, which hinted at a deeper trauma than just the loss of a parent. To truly understand the present, Marco knew he had to excavate the past. He began by delving into the history of the Ashton family, for that was the name of the homestead and its inhabitants. He learned that the seemingly idyllic farm, nestled in the verdant embrace of Oakhaven Valley, had been in Elena's family for generations. It was her inheritance, a source of both pride and a subtle point of contention in her marriage to Ricardo, who had come from humbler beginnings in the neighboring town of Crestwood. Had this difference in background ever bred resentment, a silent chasm that widened over the years? Had Ricardo ever felt overshadowed by Elena's inheritance, his own accomplishments diminished in comparison? Had financial pressures, perhaps unknown to outsiders, strained their bond, creating fault lines in their seemingly solid union? Marco considered the possibility that the farm, while a symbol of Elena's legacy, might have also become a source of unspoken tension and potential conflict within the marriage. Marco sought out old friends of Elena, neighbors who had known her since childhood. They spoke of a vibrant, generous woman, a pillar of the local church and a cherished member of the community. Her laughter, they recalled, could fill a room, and her willingness to help others was legendary. But even in their fond recollections, subtle hints of past conflicts emerged. Whispers of a youthful indiscretion, a broken engagement before Ricardo entered the picture, suggested that Elena's life hadn't been entirely without shadows. This former fiancé, a local carpenter named Daniel, had reportedly been heartbroken when Elena abruptly ended their relationship. Had he ever truly moved on? Could a ghost from that past have resurfaced, bringing with it old grievances, a rekindled obsession, and the potential for violence? Marco made a note to track down Daniel, to understand his whereabouts and his relationship with Elena in the years leading up to her death. Ricardo's past, too, came under Marco's scrutiny. His rise from a modest background to a respected farmer was a testament to his hard work, yet rumors persisted of a ruthless ambition, a man who wouldn't let sentiment stand in the way of his goals. Stories circulated about his aggressive business tactics, his unwavering focus on profit, sometimes at the expense of others. Had this ambition ever manifested in ways that could have created enemies or sown seeds of resentment? Marco discovered a past business venture involving a land deal that had ended in acrimony, leaving Ricardo with a lingering legal dispute and a former partner, a volatile man named Silas, who harbored a bitter grudge and had reportedly made threats against Ricardo in the past. Could this old adversary have sought revenge, and might Elena have become an unintended casualty, a tragic consequence of a feud not her own? Marco decided to delve deeper into this business dispute, to understand the extent of Silas's animosity towards Ricardo and whether Elena might have been aware of these threats. The relationship between the Ashton siblings also warranted closer examination. Isabella, the eldest, carried the air of someone who had always borne responsibility, perhaps shielding her younger brother from some of the harsher realities of family life. Neighbors recalled Isabella often mediating disputes between her parents, a quiet strength that belied a potential inner turmoil. Julian, on the other hand, seemed somewhat sheltered, his youthful innocence perhaps a result of being kept in the dark about family tensions. Marco sensed the subtle distance between the two, a lack of the easy camaraderie one might expect between siblings. Isabella's protectiveness of Julian seemed almost excessive, while Julian often appeared to defer to his sister's opinions without question. Were there unspoken resentments, perhaps stemming from the distribution of family responsibilities or perceived favoritism in their parents' affections for future plans for the farm? Did Isabella resent the burden of responsibility she carried, or did Julian harbor a silent resentment for being treated like a child? The unexpected arrival of Clara, Ricardo's sister, further complicated the picture. Her grief, while present, seemed tinged with a sharp edge, her remarks about Elena laced with a subtle undercurrent of criticism. She often referred to Elena's high and mighty airs and hinted at Elena's disapproval of Ricardo's family. Marco recalled the handyman Elias's mention of a shadowy visitor. Could this have been Clara? What was her relationship with her sister-in-law truly like? Neighbors recounted several loud arguments between the two women, often centering around perceived slights against Ricardo and Clara's feeling that Elena looked down upon her and her family. These weren't just petty squabbles fueled by minor disagreements, they spoke of a deeper, more fundamental clash of personalities and perhaps even a long-standing animosity, a simmering resentment that could potentially boil over into something more dangerous. Marco decided to investigate Clara's whereabouts on the night of the murder and to explore the full extent of her contentious relationship with Elena. Marco decided to revisit Elias, hoping to jog his memory about the mysterious visitor. Under more focused questioning, Elias recalled a few more details, a distinctive limp favoring his left leg, and a habit of nervously fidgeting with a heavy silver ring etched with an unusual crest. These details, while still vague, offered a sliver of something tangible in the swirling fog of suspicion. Could Ricardo or someone connected to the family have such a characteristic? Marco made a mental note to observe everyone closely for these telltale signs, paying particular attention to their gait and any jewelry they might wear. He also sought to understand the dynamics within the Aston household. Were there financial strains that might have led to desperation? Marco learned that the farm, while generally prosperous, had recently faced some setbacks due to a blight affecting their primary crop, a significant loss that had put a strain on their finances. Had this created tensions between Elena and Ricardo? Had they argued about finances, perhaps about selling a portion of the land or taking out a loan? Isabella's dismissive mention of a recent disagreement now took on a more significant hue. What was the true nature of that argument? Had it been a minor tiff about household expenses, or a more serious confrontation hinting at deeper marital problems and financial anxieties? Marco interviewed several of Elena's closest confidants, women who had shared the intimacies of her life. They painted a picture of a woman who, despite her outward strength and community involvement, had confided in them about growing anxieties in her marriage. Ricardo, they suggested, had become increasingly withdrawn in recent months, his once warm demeanor replaced by a brooding silence and occasional outbursts of temper. Had there been another woman? Had Elena suspected infidelity, and had this suspicion led to confrontations? The name of a local woman, Beatrice, a recent widow who had become a frequent visitor to the Aston farm under the guise of purchasing produce, surfaced in these conversations, adding another layer of complexity to the intricate web of relationships. Elena's friends hinted at a possible intimacy between Ricardo and Beatrice, a betrayal that could have fueled intense emotions and potentially a motive for violence. As Marco pieced together these fragments of the past and the subtle inconsistencies of the present, a darker picture began to emerge. The idyllic facade of the Aston family was cracking under the pressure of scrutiny, revealing hidden resentments, long-held secrets, and simmering conflicts. The possibility that Elena's death was not a random act of violence, but the culmination of a more personal and deeply rooted animosity, grew stronger with each passing hour. The ghosts of the past were beginning to materialize, their shadowy forms hinting at motives and suspects that lay far closer to home than a band of unknown robbers. The investigation was no longer just about finding a killer, it was about unraveling the complex tapestry of a family's secrets, a task that promised to be as emotionally fraught as it was intellectually demanding. What other skeletons lay hidden in the closets of Oakhaven Farm, and which of the living carried the heaviest burden of guilt, their outward grief amasked for a darker truth? The answers, Marco suspected, lay buried deep within the shadows of their shared history. The seemingly placid surface of Oakhaven Valley concealed a turbulent undercurrent of human emotions, of loves and losses, of ambitions and resentments that had been silently shaping the lives of its inhabitants for years. Now, with Elena Aston's death, these undercurrents were being violently exposed, threatening to pull everyone connected to her into their murky depths. Marco felt the weight of this hidden history pressing down on him, the unspoken words and veiled glances hinting at a truth far more complex and potentially far more sinister than a simple robbery gone awry. The investigation was entering a new, more psychologically intricate phase, one where the shadows of the past held the key to unlocking the darkness of the present. What long-held grudges, what buried secrets, what unacknowledged desires could have fueled such a brutal act? The answers, Marco knew, lay hidden within the tangled web of their lives, waiting to be brought into the harsh light of day. Leading from this exploration of the past, the investigation would inevitably turn towards a more direct confrontation with the individuals whose lives were most closely intertwined with Elena's. The subtle inconsistencies and emerging complexities demanded a closer look at their testimonies, a deeper probing into their motivations and their potential involvement. Marco planned to re-interview each family member, armed with the new information he had gleaned, looking for cracks in their stories, inconsistencies in their alibis, and any flicker of guilt or deception in their eyes. He intended to delve into the specifics of the parental argument Isabella had dismissed, to understand the nature of Ricardo's recent withdrawal, and to gently probe Julian's seemingly naive recollections. The shadows of the past had begun to take shape. The next step was to see if those shadows held the face of a killer. By the way, there are some extensions that require Gemini app activity to work. You can turn this on at Gemini app activity. The festive air of the year's end did little to soothe the unease that had settled over the Rodriguez and Guabita households. Benilda Moore Rodriguez, cousin to Jose Miguel and a familiar face in the El Toro neighborhood, couldn't shake off the disquieting tales of recent robberies. It wasn't just petty theft, these were violent encounters, farmers gagged and their peace shattered by unseen intruders in the remote plains. And the chilling whispers, confirmed by hushed police reports, spoke of some who hadn't survived these brutal invasions. A knot of fear tightened in the stomachs of the Rodriguez siblings when they realized their parents, Jose Miguel and Rosa, were alone on their isolated farm. Their only companion was Juan Jose Rodriguez, a son of Jose Miguel from outside his marriage, whom Rosa had welcomed into their home to lend a hand with the demanding farm work. A fragile piece, it seemed, held captive by the vast, silent landscape. But within a month, that fear curdled into a stark, irreversible tragedy. The 10th night of January in 2016 began like any other. Around the crisp hour of 6:40 a.m., Jose Miguel's voice crackled over the phone line to Rosa. He needed Juan Jose to head out to the bull enclosure to fetch him. His motorcycle, he claimed, had sputtered its last breath. Juan Jose revved his own bike and set off towards the main road of the village, a 10-minute ride from the familiar farmhouse. But when he arrived at the designated spot, Jose Miguel was nowhere to be seen. Only a friend stood waiting in the hazy morning light near a place called Hogar Villa. An almost unbearable 30 minutes crawled by before Jose Miguel finally appeared. Wordless, the two men climbed onto Juan Jose's motorcycle and sped back towards the farm. Juan Jose parked the bike in the living room, the smell of exhaust momentarily eclipsing the familiar scent of earth and livestock. He followed Jose Miguel towards the kitchen table, and it was then that Huacho's simple question sliced through the morning quiet. What happened here? Juan Jose turned, his gaze sweeping towards his room on the side of the house. What he saw then defied comprehension. Everything was overturned, a chaotic jumble of belongings. He backed away slowly. The house, it hadn't looked like this when he left. Jose Miguel, having dismounted the motorcycle, flung open the door. A strangled cry escaped his stepmother's lips, "Rosa! Rosa!" But silence was her only reply. Juan Jose stepped hesitantly into the room, his eyes drawn to the still figure lying there. And then he saw it, the horrifying, expanding stain of blood on the floor. Yane. Rosa and Guavita had been subjected to a brutal, inexplicable attack. Their bodies bore the unmistakable marks of savage violence. The room itself was a testament to the struggle, a scene of utter chaos. The bedclothes were ripped and tangled, the mattress askew, the table overturned, scattering its contents across the floor. Every detail screamed of a violent confrontation. Jose Miguel Rodriguez and his son Juan Jose Rodriguez were the first to stumble upon the horrific scene. They tried, desperately. Following the intricate web of deceit and the relentless pursuit of truth, the echoes of this crime resonate long after the initial shock. The quiet life in the eastern plains of Colombia was shattered, leaving behind a void and a chilling testament to the darkness that can reside within the familiar. For years, Rosa and José Miguel Rodriguez had built a life together, a seemingly idyllic existence marked by family celebrations and the simple joys of rural life. Their love story, blossoming from a childhood game, had yielded 3 sons, Edwin, Hamilton, and Yesid. The community regarded them as a happy family, their home a beacon of warmth. Yet, beneath this veneer of contentment, unseen tensions and betrayals were brewing, ultimately culminating in a brutal act that would unravel their lives forever. The investigation, spearheaded by the victim's own son, Yesid Rodriguez, a police officer, unveiled a tragedy far more complex and personal than a simple robbery. Stripping away the initial assumptions and the carefully constructed facade, Yesid navigated the treacherous terrain of familial bonds and professional duty. The lessons etched in the aftermath of Rosa's murder are stark, appearances can be deceiving, and the deepest betrayals can come from those closest to us. The human heart, capable of profound love and connection, also harbors the potential for immense cruelty and calculated violence. The initial shock of Rosa's death rippled through the community, but the subsequent revelations about the perpetrator sent tremors of disbelief and horror. The emotional landscape of this case is a desolate one. The profound loss of a mother, the shattering of a family unit, and the agonizing realization of betrayal by a father figure, these are wounds that cut deep. For Yesid, the dual role of grieving son and objective investigator presented an unimaginable burden. Each clue uncovered, each interview conducted, brought him closer to a truth that threatened to destroy the very foundation of his family. The narrative compels us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of crime and punishment. Is justice truly blind when the accused is family? Can the scales of law outweigh the ties of blood? The testimony of Nestor Diaz, the discovery of the blood-stained boot, the unsettling behavior of the family dog, these were pieces of a puzzle that painted a grim picture of a husband driven by a possessive rage. The phrase he reportedly uttered, "If you're not for me, you're for no one," chillingly foreshadowed the tragic outcome. Furthermore, the story raises poignant questions about the capacity for forgiveness. Can Yesid and his brother ever reconcile with the man who took their mother's life? Is forgiveness a necessary component of healing, or is it a burden too heavy to bear in the face of such a heinous act? The path to healing, if it exists at all, appears fraught with pain and the lingering shadow of what was lost. The finality of José Miguel's imprisonment offers a form of legal closure, yet the emotional chasm within the Rodriguez family remains vast and seemingly unbridgeable. In the end, the "Do am toy ac," the echoes of crime, linger not just in the legal proceedings and the imprisonment of the guilty, but in the fractured relationships and the enduring emotional scars. The questions remain, hanging in the air like a somber note: what is the true cost of betrayal within a family? And how does one reconcile the love for a parent with the undeniable horror of their actions? These are the unsettling reflections that this tragic narrative leaves imprinted upon the reader's mind, prompting us to consider the complexities of human nature and the enduring consequences of our choices.